I had a dream.
This is the Morning Drill on Stream Television and the Allegheny News Talk Sports Network. Joining us this morning is State Representative Kathy Rapp. Good morning. Good to see you this morning.
Good morning. It's great to be here on this beautiful day.
Lots going on. Let's get right into things here this morning. Have you had any chance to sleep?
I have, but I'm not sleeping well.
I don't think many legislators are lately.
So there's this thing called a budget, right?
Yes.
Well, give us an update on what's going on with the budget. Where do we stand right now this week with it?
Well, let me back up. You know, the House passed a budget on April 4th that it was about $1 billion less than what the budget ended up being. So in April, I voted for the budget when it left the House. It was about 31 some plus $1 billion for the state. It included $100 million more for education, $25 million more for special education. That remained in what we got back from the Senate. Unfortunately, when it came back from the Senate, it had about $1 billion more to spend, which we do not have the revenue, which is a problem. So at that point in time, I voted no. There were only 27 House members that voted no on final passage. And for the region, there were 2 legislators that voted no, myself and Senator Hutchinson. Everyone else was a yes. The problem with this budget is the Constitution calls for us to pass a balanced budget. This is not balanced because we do not have the revenues that match the spending. As a matter of fact, just yesterday we received from our Appropriations Chair, Stan Saylor, we get an economic brief on a monthly basis, which shows us all the incoming taxes, which taxes come in every day, so there's still money in the Treasury. So the money's still going to the Treasury, but not enough. So that's our dilemma. In the House, we had passed several bills to expand and bring in more revenue. We passed a huge expansion in gaming, which I was a no on principle. I'm just not a fan of gambling. But the fact of the matter is we do not have the revenue to meet this budget that was passed. And the governor did not sign it, and he did not blue line, which means veto line by line, any of the line items in the budget. So now we are left with this $32+ billion budget that was brought back over from the Senate. So we are now at a point where we have to pass some new form of revenue, whether that be taxes. The Senate could pass that gaming expansion that the House voted for. The Senate is looking at borrowing on the Tobacco Settlement Fund to make up the difference. Of course, there's always talk about a severance tax, increasing sales, increasing the personal income tax, which it would be very difficult to pass, I believe, in the House. Mostly from the West. The Southeast Republicans and Democrats would probably vote for any of those on passage. So that's where we are. The Senate was called in yesterday. They went back into session, but I messaged Senator Hutchinson, and they have not passed, as of yesterday, another revenue bill. So we are still in this dilemma. Now what do we do that the governor just let that bill become law? Where do we find the revenue to match that budget?
It'll be like the last one, just sitting on the desk collecting dust.
Yes. But, you know, we knew going into this that we were short of revenue. Going back to that economic brief that we receive every month, the revenues were not coming in the way that we had projected. So the House in April, it was more of a balanced budget, but coming back from the Senate with another $1 billion was just more than I could vote for.
Is that? I mean, do you just get that information and that's it, or is there details with that? Why is it slow coming in?
Well, you know, I think people think that raising taxes is going to bring in more revenue. For example, we put a higher tax on cigarettes. This is a perfect example of incentivizing people to quit smoking instead of paying more for their vice. Instead, they choose to quit and save themselves some money instead of paying the taxes. It's like the failed soda tax in Philadelphia. People choose to go elsewhere where they can buy, cigarettes, soda, whatever's being taxed. We made the horrible decision, which I didn't vote for either, of taxing the vape stores, which I'm not a fan of vaping. I even had a bill that would prohibit allowing minors to purchase vape products. But there's a perfect example of taxing a business out of business. So revenue that we were expecting because we increased their tax so much, instead they chose to close their doors. But we receive those economic briefs every single month, and every single month the numbers were on the downside.
Can I ask you something kind of along those lines? With personal income taxes, what is the rate of collection on that? Is the state successfully collecting that?
Well, here's the thing about personal income tax. Yes, because those are paid directly out of your pay. The interesting thing about Pennsylvania and the personal income tax is that Pennsylvania does not tax retirement. The personal income tax is strictly on working people. So if you're retired, if you receive a pension, you're not paying that tax.
Okay, now this kind of leads into another question. There are those who are delinquent in personal income taxes. Is the state aggressively going after that? Could that be done more efficiently?
There's been pieces of legislation to try and collect any back taxes. But here again, you're talking about people for whatever reason are not paying their taxes. Did they come into hard times? Did they lose their job? So then going after those people, like garnishing their pay for whether it's federal or state, are you punishing them even more? Look, I'm a taxpayer. I own property, so yes, I want people to pay their taxes as well. Because when they don't pay their taxes, it hurts all the rest of us. It's just like looking at welfare and helping out the truly needy. We want anybody who's able-bodied off of welfare, and we want them working and contributing to the system because we want to help the truly needy. We are not happy about helping able-bodied people who could be in the workforce.
Well, then it only makes sense to raise taxes then, because that'll make people want to pay their
more taxes.
Yeah.
Well, where I was going with that is why not make it more efficient? The federal government seems to have a procedure whereby folks can easily make arrangements to pay their back taxes. Pennsylvania, not so much. Has there ever been any thought given to that?
Yes, there has been, and there have been some bills that have gone to the Finance Committee. But then again, we always have this conversation. We have people who've lost their jobs, and so if they didn't pay their taxes when they were working, how can we recoup that money when they're in tough times? Mm-hmm. Not to say that that everybody is, but are we hurting people even further? But I will tell you that the estimated amount for personal income taxes was $1.25 billion, and we actually collected $1.22 billion.
That's pretty efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it is the morning drill on Stream Television, Armstrong, and the Allegheny News Talk Sports Network. Well, that's the budget. There's a lot of other things you're working on, and let's go back a couple weeks ago, more than a couple weeks ago, but there was a big discussion about the University of Pittsburgh at Titusville and education. What were your thoughts on Pitt officials coming here and having that town hall meeting?
Well, I think it actually is a good thing for the University of Pitt to engage the community. You know, the community has a lot to gain or a lot to lose if Titusville loses that campus. So I think in engaging the community and bringing people to the table to share their concerns, there's definitely been a decline in enrollment, but that's not just an issue with Pitt Titusville. That is an issue that's hitting all of our higher education. And we were on a phone conference last week with our higher education system, and they're facing the same thing, declining enrollment. And so there was a task force that was commissioned, and the task force came back and said, we do not want to close these facilities, but we need to rethink the course offerings and what we're doing in higher education to attract our students. One of the very first meetings I had at Pitt Titusville was, and this was several years ago, was along those same lines. We need to start rethinking what's offered in higher education to make sure that we are educating and training our students for the jobs of today and tomorrow, not the jobs of yesteryear. We need to get out of this routine of doing the same old thing, and instead of looking at programs that would be vital to keeping our communities going. For example, I've talked to several people in the community, and one of the things that we discussed was maybe Pitt Titusville being a hub for training students in the medical technology fields. This could be easily done with the University of Pitt. And by the way, they're sitting on like $3 billion in reserves, so and endowments. So, you know, they could, in my opinion, invest more in maintaining the buildings here. That's a huge issue. But we need to rethink about what is offered here.
Why does it seem like this conversation comes up and everybody goes, oh, yeah, that's right, well, let's reinvent education, and nothing happens?
Well, it's the same thing, though, in K through 12. The same thing. You know, every time there's a new administration, you know, there's new ideas, and so we keep changing, and not always for the better. But I have heard good things about the elementary school, I believe, in Hightown, which I'm hoping to visit in the fall to look at some of the new innovative things that they are doing. But I think that the community knows that they have to be involved, and we have to be looking at job or course offerings where people can actually graduate and enter into the workforce. And obviously, medical technology is a very growing field. In technology, the advancements in medical technology, there's a real need there, and I think it would be a great fit for this campus. I am one voice, and at the end of the day, it's really the decisions are made by, you know, Pittsburgh, and whoever the person is who will be, you know, the president or chancellor.
I will say I have had conversations with folks where university officials have reached out and even visited members of this community, so that it wasn't just lip service, which I initially thought it might have been. Right. These folks are actually now doing some research, which I give them a lot of credit for. You have a colleague, Representative Brad Roy, who actually just posted this morning. Should the federal government get out of education and let the states and local communities manage it?
You want me to ask that, or answer that? Well, you know, I'm a big fan of local control in education. this will panic a lot of people. Remember, it was Jimmy Carter who actually started the Department of Education. And if history serves me right and articles that I've read serves me right, it was done because he owed a political favor to PSCA and other educational association groups. That was his promise, if he had their support, that he would start a Department of Education. Now, I've been to Washington, D.C., and the Department of Education is just like every other bureaucracy. It would probably, the Department of Education would probably encompass all of this downtown area. So there's a lot to be said there, because I do believe in local control. However, our educational system has become dependent on those federal dollars. So it's I think, lofty to put out there, but I don't think that you can just suddenly cut off, all of that funding. It would be very difficult, I believe, even for special education, even though at the federal level, Congress promised 40% of the funding for special education, and they've never gotten above 17%.
Wow.
So if we're talking, dollars when we say...
Should I call downstairs?
Call downstairs?
Yeah, I'll call downstairs. Get something going down there.
Oh, yes, I get it now. Yes, to the congressman's office.
Yes.
But
I have a special red phone here that goes right to Joe.
We've tried
That's all Joe needs.
Yeah.
We've tried to address this with our U.S. congressmen and our U.S. senators, but look, their budget is even worse than Pennsylvania's. Their, the debt in Washington is scary. So I don't know. I think if we could maybe gradually phase it out, but then you have to ask, how are you going to fund local school districts? Now, where I live, it's a consolidated district. Warren County is where I live. It's a consolidation of one administration for the entire county, and so is Forest. And I certainly think that with the declining enrollment in Crawford and some of the surrounding counties, McKean, Elk, and we see what's happening in Erie, what a mess. And they came to Harrisburg and begged for $14 million, which they are getting out of this budget if we get the revenue. So can the state pick up the tab? That's the question. Can the local school districts and the state pick up the tab and the dollars if the Department of Education was done away with? That's the big thing. But if we did do away with it, a lot of regulations and mandates would probably go away as well.
Right. You have your name attached to one or two bills. What have you been working on?
Well, I'm very excited to say that my House Bill 1494, the Good Neighbor Policy with the Allegheny National Forest, the governor signed Friday. It passed unanimously in the House and the Senate. It's a very good bill for anyone involved, actually the entire state, but for our timber industry. People probably do not realize that forest products is Pennsylvania's #1 export. And we still have some furniture manufacturers in the southeast, and they get a lot of their wood for their manufacturing from the northwest. A lot of that from the Allegheny National Forest area, especially the cherry, oak, maple, comes from the northwest. So this is a good bill. The last forest plan, the U.S. Forest Service had promised to harvest 52 million board feet. They've never gone above 19 million board feet.
Really?
Really. So it's a 500,000 acre forest that lies within Warren Forest, Elk, and McKean. And there's a formula so that any timber harvest, a percentage of that revenue goes to the school districts and the townships, the counties in the forest area. But just beyond that revenue, when you think about forest products being our number one export, and you know the resource that timber is, it allows Pennsylvania to be more of a partner in fighting the invasive species, which we've been fighting the ash borer for several years, and allows us to be a partner in the timber harvesting. But I've served on the Hardwoods Council and the State Task Force on Forestry for 13 years. Both of these councils work with Penn State and our state foresters, and so these are issues, the invasive species, the timber harvesting, the marketing of our timber across the entire state of Pennsylvania is basically what we talk about on those two councils. And we've been talking about more of a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Forest Service for several years. So the governor commissioned a Green Ribbon Task Force, and Secretary Redding, who chairs Department of Agriculture, and Secretary Dunn, who is with Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, as well as PennDOT and Fish and Game Commission. They're all on board with this, and this is one of the recommendations that came out of the Green Ribbon Task Force. But the Good Neighbor policy itself started in Washington, D.C. under the 2014 Farm Bill, which was actually sponsored by Congressman Glenn Thompson.
State Representative Kathy Rapp joining us. It's great to see you.
Great to see you as well.
Busy, busy, busy.
Yeah.
And maybe that budget will be in place by Christmas.
I don't know when
No
we're
guessing.
going back. I have no idea. We will be going back, but the Senate is, I don't know what the Senate's doing, if they're going to be passing any revenue bills or not this
Wow.
week.
Well, good luck with everything that you're working on.
Thank you.
And we'll talk
Thank
to you
very
soon.
much. Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
This is the Morning Drill on Stream Television and the Allegheny News Talk Sports Network.
Let's make a night you won't remember. I'll be the one you won't forget.